Welcome to CIMA Managerial Level Lecture Series. Today we are discussing related to Advanced Management Accounting, and today's lecture is related to activity based costing and also activity based management, and my name is Vidya Rajavasam. In this lecture we will be discussing activity based costing and also activity based management systems. So, what is basically activity based costing? So, if you look at if you want an accountant or the organization wanted to calculate the full product cost, it is very difficult to get this information from the financial accounting system. So, and also the information provided by the financial accounting system, it is also not adequate for decision making related to the product costing. So, what do you mean by this product cost or the full product cost? So, the product cost basically includes the direct material cost, direct labor cost, energy cost, and also there are direct and indirect variables. So, indirect costs basically called the overheads. So, the overheads also has two categories. There are direct overheads and also there are variable overheads. So, let us move on. If you look at the traditional costing systems, they basically, if they want to calculate a product cost, they calculate this by, there is a predetermined overhead absorption rate in order to calculate this indirect variable costs. But if you look at this concept again, this concept also has its own weaknesses, because overhead absorption rate basically use the volume of activity in order to calculate the absorption rate related to absorbing and also apportioning the overhead costs. So, therefore, the concept of activity based costing, it is coming into the picture now, and why it is needed is the critical question here. So, if you look at, if there are new products coming into the market, or the current product has to be given a special pricing. So, the basis of those new information or the new data or the new product pricing or special pricing, the decisions has to be made based on the incremental revenues and also incremental costs. So, that is where if you look at the absorption costing does not provide this particular decision making and also special pricing issues with this ordinary or the traditional job costing methods. So, therefore, we will have to move into activity based costing. So, let us discuss this activity based costing little bit further. So, Cooper and Kaplan, those are management theorists, developed a more refined approach assigning these overheads to product costs. So, basically what they have done is they came up with this activity based costing concept, and which is very useful in decision making process. So, this Cooper and Kaplan supported many activities, and also they have identified the main causes or what is driving these overheads. So, these things they have named as supporting activities. So, what are these supporting activities? Because we have discussed about the direct cost, now we are talking about indirect costs, and they have basically understood that what are the causes of these indirect costs. So, they have named this as supporting activities. So, what are the examples of supporting activities? One is material handling, quality inspections, setting up of machinery for production, then also material acquisition. So, now let us look at the activity based costing, the philosophy. So, let us go one by one and see how this concept is, or the philosophy is developed. So, basically the support activities we have discussed in the earlier slide are the main causes of product costs, or the support activities basically creates the cost related to one particular product. So, the products basically consume these related activities. So, we have to be careful in understanding this. In order to arrive at the product cost, we have to see what are the overheads. Overheads are basically the supporting activities, and the supporting activities are the contributors to these product cost. So, basically the products consume these related activities in order to make them. So, therefore, the cost should be charged on the basis of consumption of activities. Now, we have to be clear on that. Once the products, or in the production line, these activities are consumed only, these charges are incurring, and therefore, we can say the cost should be charged on the basis of consumption of activities. So, if you look at the activity based costing method, we can go one by one, and basically we are going to discuss about these supporting activities. So, in order to do this, if you want to start activity based costing in your organization, first thing you need to do is the identification of organization's major activities. So, what are these activities? So, if you want to have a scenario where you want to identify certain activities which is contributing to these supporting activities, so you need to understand 30 to 50 activities would be very ideal in finding out this identification of the related activities. Basically, if you look at an organization, 80% of the overheads are generated from the 20% of the activities. So, based on that, let us move on and identify further on this activity based costing system. So, once you have identified the related activities, supporting activities, then you can estimate the cost associated with performing those activities. So, once the cost estimates are identified, or the costs are collected, those costs will be pooled into cost pools. So, the cost pools basically identify the factors which is affecting the cost related to a particular cost pool. So, what are the factors, or these factors which is influencing a cost pool is known as the cost drivers. So, what are these cost drivers, or the factors which is affecting the cost pool? So, the cost drivers are cost of setting up machinery will influence the number of setups carried out. So, if the number of setups are less, the setup is a procedure that you need to adopt when you want to change the machinery to produce one set of products. So, that is called the product setup, the machinery setup, and there is a cost to it. So, therefore, the cost driver is the number of setups that you want to put it into the machinery or to the machine system. So, here in this example you will be able to see the cost drivers, and the example of a cost driver is the cost of setting up machinery, and there will be number of setups in order to produce various types of products. Then we move on to the calculation of the cost driver rate. So, example is rate per setup, we have just discussed in the earlier slide. How much is the cost per setup or the rate per setup? So, for example, again another example will be rate per material access or rate per inspection. And how do you calculate this? Or the cost driver rate can be calculated dividing the cost pool value by the level of cost drivers. Basically what happens is, after doing that calculation process, the overheads can be charged now to the products basis of the activities which use or the consume those products. So, basically the cost drivers and also the activities which consume a certain product or the product line is consuming the activities will be absorbed into product cost using the cost drivers. So, we have discussed about the philosophy and the methods of activity based costing. Now, let us look at what are the favorable conditions for activity based costing. If you look at the production overheads, if the production overheads costs are very high in comparison to the direct cost, then we can use ABC as an ideal method of absorbing these indirect costs. That is one example. And also let us move on to another example. When there is a greater diversity in product range, as discussed earlier, if there are so many products, you can clearly see you need to set up the machinery in several instances. So, therefore, you can able to understand that depending on the products that you are going to produce, you will have to set up this machinery in several times. So, therefore, if you have a greater diversity of products or product range, then also there will be lot of setup cost, inspection cost, maybe you need to get material separately. So, therefore, the activity based costing system is much more ideal for this scenario. And also, where there is a greater diversity of overheads costs, where you can understand by, for example, overheads cost can be product design, then product delivery, then product distribution, those are also overhead costs. So, if there is a greater diversity of overhead costs, not only the machine setup, but design cost, inspection cost, quality cost. Again, if you look at, if the diversity of the overhead costs are very big or there is a range of overhead cost, then again it is ideal to use activity based costing. So, let us look at the hierarchy of activity based costing system. Cooper and Kaplan propose cost hierarchy framework based on the activities that occur at 4 levels. So, let us look at what are these 4 levels. One is the unit level. These activities basically at the unit level are performed, and where we need to understand the activities basically at the unit level is directly proportion to the number of units that we are producing. Then let us look at the next level of activities, that is the batch level. So, the activities production line is performing basically related to the number of batches that we produce. So, therefore, the number of batches basically in direct proportion to the cost which is incurred. Then let us look at the third level, product sustaining activities. Again in this hierarchy, this is the third level, and that is called the product sustaining activities. So, what are these product sustaining activities? The product product sustaining activities basically perform for various products produced in a product line, but you can see here clearly the resources consumed are independent from the number of units and also number of batches. A good example is related to product sustaining activities is the product design cost. Then we move on to facility sustaining activities. If you take a large factory, basically there are several product lines, and you can see that the activity is basically not related to the product or the production itself, but this is basically related to the facilitating and the maintaining of the buildings or the structures. For example, a good example is plant security and also business rates, because for a factory premises you need to pay business rates. But these costs are considered as overheads, and also these costs has to be factored into the number of products that we are producing, and also that is it has to be factored into the product costs. Now we have ended the first session. We have discussed about the activity based concept, and we have discussed the philosophy, methods. So let us go through and revise what we have just learned through some MCQs. So the first question is, there are direct and indirect costs related to production of products. So what are the direct costs? So the answers are given. First answer is direct materials, second is direct labor, third is plant maintenance cost, and also the fourth one is the quality control cost. So what will be the answer? The answer is the direct costs are basically the direct materials and direct labor. Let us move on to the second MCQ. In activity based costing, the product hierarchy levels we have just discussed in the previous slides. So what are these product hierarchy levels are? One is the facility sustaining activities, low cost product setups, product sustaining activities, batch related activities. So let us see what are the answers. So there are three answers here. One is the facility sustaining activities, another one is the product sustaining activities, and the final one is batch related activities. Therefore, the correct answer is A, C and D, and low cost product setups are not part of the product hierarchy level. Now let us move on to the benefits and the limitations of activity based costing. So basically the activity based costing provides more accurate product line costing for non volume related overheads, and where we have diverse products are produced. So let us look at this in a different manner. We are talking about a product line, and we want to accurately estimate the cost of certain products, but the basis should not be the volume base, because if you look at the volume based cost calculation is related to the traditional absorption costing methods. So here with the ABC system, it provides an accurate cost for a non-volume based environment or non-volume based overheads, and it also supports the diverse range of products. So let us look at the second one. What are the benefits? ABC or the activity based costing provides flexibility to analyze the cost objects rather than the processes. So that is a very good advantage, and let us see what are these cost objects are. So the cost objects are the product costs that are accumulated into a certain category. So therefore you can see these cost objects are basically surrounding the activities, which is related to setting up cost, inspection, quality control, all these can be categorized under product cost objects, and therefore, ABC provides flexibility to analyze these cost objects rather than looking at the processes and trying to absorb the costing through overhead absorption rates. Then the third one is we can discuss about this ABC costing system provides a reliable indication of long run variable costs, which supports basically, if you know, for example, if the strategic decisions has to be made on a product pricing, or maybe if you have a new product which is going to get developed in the future, and if you want to do a proper pricing, the ABC, activity based costing, basically provides a reliable indication of variable product costs, because as you know, through ABC only we understand what are the activities and what are the costs related to those activities. Furthermore, the fourth benefit is the activity based costing also provides the financial and also non-financial measures relevant to cost management and performance management. So, what do you mean by this? So, basically the financial information is related to cost and also drivers of cost, and also what are the activities related, and the non-financial costs are related to the volume, cost driver volumes, how much is the volume that we are producing, and those are basically not related to financials, but it is related to the volume that we are producing. So, therefore, if you want to manage a performance where how much volume that has been created in a particular period, the activity based costing supports that scenario. Furthermore, one of the benefits is identification and understanding of cost behavior. So, if you know the cost behavior, basically you can support the future cost estimation, and also you can basically, if you can analyze or estimate your cost accurately, what will happen is it is again supporting the decision making process. So, therefore, if you want to estimate a certain product cost, the activity based costing basically provides those estimations, and also if you have some estimates currently, the activity based costing also supports the improvement of those estimations. Finally, the final benefit of activity based costing is it provides more logical, acceptable and more comprehensive basis for costing. So, we have gone through the benefits. Now, let us see what are the limitations of activity based costing. So, the limitations are, there is little evidence to prove where the ABC or the activity based costing improves corporate profitability. The little evidence, but if you really go into that, or if you really research on that, you will be able to know that activity based costing is really supporting the profitability of the organization, but at the moment there is little evidence. Also, another limitation is ABC information or the activity based costing information is internally oriented, and also it is historical. So, therefore, some theories argue that it have the lack of relevance for strategic decision making, because the focus is basically internal, and also we are looking at historical costs. Another limitation is the practical problems related to cost driver selection. I think you must have understood from the previous slides, some people or maybe in some instances it is very difficult to understand these cost drivers, activities, cost pools, cost objects, little bit some people have a difficulty in understanding all these small things in detail. And also another drawback in this activity based costing is there is no novelty, and the procedure is basically questionable since it involves rigorous application of conventional costing procedures. So, there is nothing can be improved, there is no novelty. So, basically you are carrying out rigorous conventional costing procedures in order to analyze a product cost. So, there is little novelty in achieving these product costs in a different manner. Then let us look at activity based costing and also decision making process. So, activity based systems are designed to provide historical cost information relating to firms' products. So, ABC or the activity based costing basically helps the management in analyzing and interpreting firms' profitability. Now, this is where we are coming to a very important area. Basically, the ABC is helping the management to analyze and interpret the firm's profitability. So, therefore, ABC can play a significant role in long term decision making process. So, therefore, we can say that involvement of activity based costing basically supports the decisions concerning product pricing strategies. So, what are these product pricing strategies? Now, for example, we can say that if you want to change the product range or the product mix or the product promotion strategies, then it will help, the activity based costing is going to help the organization these critical decision making processes. And also you can say that activity based costing is also supporting the decision making process through new product developments. For example, if you identify the activities and also the cost related to those activities, and if you are developing a new product, you will be able to estimate the new product cost at a very accurate level. Then let us look at the activity based management system. So, we have discussed about the activity based costing. Now, this is related to activity based management system. So, activity based management system basically uses the information derives from the activity based costing system. So, what is this activity based management system? So, basically this involves the cost reduction, cost modeling and also customer profitability analysis. So, let us go deep into this subject. So, basically the ABM or the activity based management system seeks to classify each activity in a process into value added and non value added activities. So, basically the value added activities represent waste. So, therefore, the firm should start aiming of eliminating this waste. Example of non value adding activities. So, basically a good example is if the time spent on dealing with a customer complaints. So, basically this activity cannot be reduced or eliminated until the customer have nothing to complain. So, that is a very nice example, because we are talking about an activity based management and we are trying to reduce the non value adding activities. But if you really look at it, customer complaints are not adding value to the organization, but then how do you eliminate? So, the elimination or the reduction can happen where when the time the customer says I do not have any complaints, but generally it will not happen, but we will try to reduce the number of customer complaints. So, that it is there will be a system to understand this, identify them and reduce them under the activity based management system. and also ABC involves decision making related to activities within the process and also should focus on continuous improvement. Again, another advantage of having an activity based management system is the continuous improvement. So, therefore, the management should recognize what activities are critical to the success of the organization and start improving those activities. Once the management has identified these success factors or the critical success factors of an organization, then it should look at the costs, cost pools, cost drivers, and identify also the key performance indicators of those activities. So, therefore, you can see by going through this activity based management, from the data you derive from the activity based costing, we will be able to analyze the costs, cost pools, cost drivers, and also key performance indicators of the activities that we are performing. So, in this context, the staff should be trained and empowered to carry out these tasks in order to have a better activity based management system. Now, what are the outputs of designing and implementing activity based system? So, there are 5 basic outputs. Let us go through this little fast. One is the understanding of cost activities and business processes we have just discussed. So, basically what happens is the core to very business organization are the activities. So, activity based costing and activity based management basically identified these core activities and also the cost related to them, and on top of that the business processes carried out. Then the identification of cost of non-value adding activities. So, we have identified the core business processes or the critical success factors. Then the second step is identification of non-value adding activities, and this is extremely useful for the management because this identification of these will provide us with wasteful activities. Then the third part is activity based performance measures. Now, we are studying the activities. So, as a result of this, we can see that some of these activities we can have some key performance indicators in order to identify these activity based performance targets. That is again an output of activity based management system. Then the final one is we can estimate accurate product service costs through the activity based management system, and also we will be able to see which resources are consumed by which products, and also we will be able to accurately estimate the product or service cost accurately in this activity based management system. So, we have now come to the end of the lecture. Let us review what we have learned through some MCQ multiple choice questions. So, the question number 1 is what is true related to ABC benefits. So, the activity based costing provides accurate product costing, easy to calculate the cost drivers, provide reliable information related to long run variable cost, provide logical, acceptable and comprehensive costing framework. So, let us see the answers. So, what is true is for an ABC system is easy to calculate the cost drivers. So, let us look at the next MCQ question. What is true related to ABC and long term decision making? The first answer is supports decisions concerning product pricing, supports decisions making related to new product developments, supports product mix and product range calculations for sales promotions, and none of the above. So, what will be the correct answer is none of the above, because ABC and the long term decision making does not support the pricing strategy, and also they are not supporting product developments, and also it does not support the product mix and product range calculations related to sales promotion. We have come to the end of this lecture related to activity based management and activity based costing. I will see you in the next lecture related to the same topic, but we will be discussing in depth about these two important areas of advanced management accounting. Thank you.